The Imperial Dreadnought, Eternity's Fang, hung in the void like a crown of shattered stars, its obsidian hull stretching across 3 kilometers of space. Thousands of glowing veins pulsed beneath its surface, conduits of power that could reduce planets to ash. Inside its throne chamber, Emperor Kaelthor Zhyren sat motionless upon a seat carved from the core of a dead star, his 4 eyes reflecting nothing but cold indifference. He was massive even by his species' standards. Nearly 9 feet tall with midnight blue skin that seemed to absorb light itself, ridged horns curving back from his elongated skull, and hands that ended in clawed fingers capable of crushing titanium. His ceremonial armor, black and crimson, bore the emblems of 17 conquered systems. Around his neck hung the chain of dominion, each link forged from the crown jewel of a defeated world. "Your Radiance," a reedy voice interrupted his thoughts. Chancellor Vrix, a serpentine creature with translucent skin and too many joints, slithered forward. "The human vessel approaches. They will dock within the hour." Kaelthor's lip curled, a gesture that revealed rows of crystalline teeth. "And they actually sent someone?" "Apparently." Vrix's voice dripped with amusement. "According to our scans, the vessel is primitive, chemical propulsion, minimal shielding. It's a miracle they survived the journey through the void gates." Laughter rippled through the assembled court, a collection of the galaxy's elite. There were the Korthaxians with their gem-encrusted exoskeletons, the gaseous Feltari hovering in containment spheres, the towering Vrakesh warriors with their 6 arms and battle scars. All of them had come to witness what they considered the evening's entertainment, the arrival of Earth's offering. "I still don't understand why you accepted this farce, Your Radiance," said Lady Shara, a Korthaxian noblewoman whose carapace glittered with stolen wealth. "Humans. They're barely sentient. Their world is a backwater speck, their technology laughable, their culture non-existent." "Strategy, Lady Shara," Kaelthor replied, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the deck plates. "The Terran sector borders the disputed zones. Let them think we value them. Let them send their tribute. When the time comes to expand into their region, they'll already be bound by treaty to step aside." "And if they don't?" asked Commander Threx, a scarred Vrakesh whose honor marks covered half his face. "Then we'll remind them why 17 civilizations kneel before the Zhyren Dynasty." More laughter, more cruel smiles. Kaelthor felt nothing. He'd felt nothing for decades, perhaps centuries. Time became meaningless when you lived for millennia. He'd inherited an empire built on blood, maintained it through calculated brutality, and watched everyone he'd ever trusted betray him for power. His father had been poisoned by his own brother. His mother had attempted to assassinate him when he came of age. His first wife had been a Korthaxian spy who'd tried to steal the crown of stars from his vaults. Love was a fairy tale told to children. Marriage was a contract written in leverage and threat. This alliance with Earth meant nothing. The humans would send some desperate woman from their overpopulated, resource-poor world. He would install her in a remote wing of the palace, and the treaty would be signed. She would live out her days in luxury and irrelevance. He would never need to see her beyond the ceremony. "Your Radiance, the human vessel has docked at Bay 77, announced the Chamberlain, a precise insectoid creature with multifaceted eyes. 77? Lady Shara laughed. "That's the cargo bay. How appropriate. Shall we greet them at the throne chamber, Your Radiance?" Vrix asked. "No." Kaelthor rose from his throne, his armor whispering as he moved. "Let them come to us. Let them walk through the palace and see what power truly means. Let them understand the vast gulf between their world and ours." He descended from the dais, his footsteps echoing in the cathedral-like space. The throne chamber was a monument to conquest. Its walls were transparent, revealing the swirling nebula beyond, and its floor was a map of the Empire, each star system glowing beneath his feet. Holographic displays showed real-time feeds from 1,000 worlds, all paying tribute, all bowing to the Zhyren name. This was his prison. This was his kingdom. The court assembled in their designated positions, a precise hierarchy of power and influence. The highest-ranking nobles stood closest to the throne, their retinues arrayed behind them in descending order of importance. Guards in obsidian armor lined the walls, plasma rifles held at parade rest. Above them, anti-gravity platforms held the Empire's most dangerous weapon systems, a subtle reminder that even here, in the heart of ceremonial grandeur, death waited at the Emperor's command. Kaelthor returned to his throne and waited. The minutes stretched. He heard whispers, muffled giggles, speculation about what sort of creature the humans would present. He knew what his courtiers thought, that Earth would send some politician's ugly daughter, some unwanted burden they were desperate to be rid of, that the humans, in their primitive desperation, believed this marriage would actually protect them. Fools. All of them fools. The massive doors at the chamber's far end, carved from the heartwood of a world tree from the sylvan reaches, began to grind open. The sound reverberated like thunder. A small figure appeared in the doorway. No, 2 figures. The first was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, hunched with age, wearing robes of simple gray cloth that looked homespun and pathetic next to the grandeur surrounding her. Her face was weathered, lined with years that spoke of a hard life. Her hair, white as starlight, was pulled back in a simple braid. She walked with a wooden cane, each step deliberate and slow. Behind her came the bride. She was completely hidden. Thick veils of dark fabric covered her from head to toe, layer upon layer of cloth that revealed nothing. Not her height, not her build, not even a hint of her face. She wore simple gray robes, identical to the old woman's. No jewelry, no adornment. She moved with careful, measured steps, her head bowed. The court erupted. "That's it?" someone shrieked with laughter. "She's afraid to show her face. Look at those rags. Did they find her in a gutter? The old woman is probably more attractive." Lady Shara's voice cut through the mockery. "Your radiance, this is an insult. They send you a veiled creature in peasant clothing accompanied by a crone. Earth spits in your face." Kaelthor said nothing. He watched the 2 figures make their slow way across the vast chamber, the old woman's cane tapping rhythmically against the star-map floor. The veiled bride never looked up, never acknowledged the jeers and insults being hurled at her. She simply followed the old woman, step by careful step. Something about their silence bothered him. They should be terrified. They should be overwhelmed by the display of power, cowering before the assembled might of the galaxy's ruling class. Instead, they walked with quiet dignity, as if the mockery meant nothing, as if the throne chamber were just another room, as if the emperor himself were just another man. When they finally reached the base of the dais, the old woman stopped. She looked up at Kaelthor with eyes that were startlingly clear, startlingly sharp. Eyes that had seen things, eyes that held secrets. "Your imperial radiance," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for someone so aged. "I am Magistra Elena Vasquez, guardian and tutor to the lady. I bring you Earth's daughter, offered in the spirit of peace and the hope of understanding between our peoples." Her accent was thick, her galactic standard rudimentary, but her bearing was impeccable. She bowed, not a kowtow, not a grovel, but a measured, respectful bow that acknowledged status without surrendering dignity. "How quaint," Vrick sneered. "A human thinks she can speak to the Emperor directly. Someone should teach these primitives protocol." "Let her speak," Kaelthor said quietly. He was still watching the old woman's eyes. "You are her... what? Servant? Slave? Guardian," Elena repeated. "I raised her. I taught her. I know her heart." "Her heart?" Lady Shara laughed. "We don't care about her heart, old woman. We care whether she can fulfill her duty. Stand beside the Emperor at ceremonial functions and stay out of the way." "Then you understand nothing," Elena said simply. The chamber fell silent. No one spoke to the imperial court that way. No one contradicted a lady of the realm. Certainly not a human, not an elderly woman in peasant robes with a wooden cane. Kaelthor leaned forward slightly. "Explain yourself." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "Your people judge by appearances, by displays of power and wealth. You see our simple clothing and assume poverty. You see our veils and assume ugliness. You see humans and assume weakness." She paused. "You are wrong about all of it." "Bold words for someone whose planet couldn't defend itself against a single frigate," Commander Threx growled. "We chose not to fight," Elena said. "There is a difference between cannot and will not." "Then you chose cowardice. We chose survival. We chose to give you something far more precious than resistance." Elena turned slightly, gesturing to the veiled figure beside her. "We chose to give you truth." Kaelthor studied the old woman. There was something in her voice, something in the way she stood, that didn't fit the narrative he'd constructed. She wasn't desperate. She wasn't afraid. She was certain, as if she held cards he couldn't see. "The ceremony," he said flatly. "The treaty requires that I see my bride's face before the court, that I accept or reject the offering formally. Let us dispense with the dramatics, Magistra. Unveil her, as you wish, your radiance." Elena turned to the veiled figure and spoke softly in a language Kaelthor didn't recognize, not galactic standard, but something older, something that seemed to resonate in the air itself. The bride nodded once. The old woman reached up with gnarled hands and began to remove the veils. The first layer fell away, revealing more fabric beneath, then the second, then the third. The court watched in fascinated mockery, expecting each removal to reveal some new horror, some confirmation of their prejudices. Kaelthor found himself leaning forward despite his studied indifference. The fourth veil fell, the fifth, the sixth, and then Elena removed the final covering. The throne chamber fell into absolute silence. The bride stood revealed. She was young, perhaps 25 in human years, which meant nothing by galactic standards, but there was something about her youth that seemed luminous rather than naive. Her skin was a warm bronze, kissed by a sun Kaelthor had never seen. Her hair fell in dark waves past her shoulders, so black it held blue highlights in the chamber's crystalline illumination. Her features were delicate but strong, high cheekbones, a straight nose, full lips set in a neutral expression that betrayed neither fear nor arrogance. But it was her eyes that stopped him. They were silver, not gray, not pale blue, silver, like molten starlight, like the metal of ancient crowns. They reflected the throne chamber's light with an inner luminescence that seemed impossible, inhuman, other, and they looked directly at him without wavering. She was beautiful, stunningly, impossibly beautiful. But that wasn't what held the court in shocked silence. Around her neck, previously hidden by the veils, hung a pendant. It was small, unadorned, just a crystal the size of a thumb, hanging from a simple silver chain. But the crystal pulsed with its own light, a soft, blue-white glow that seemed to breathe in rhythm with her heartbeat. Kaelthor recognized it immediately. Every educated being in the galaxy would recognize it. It was a soul stone. The soul stones were legend, artifacts from the Age of Guardians, before the current empires rose, before the galaxy was carved into territories and kingdoms. They were said to be fragments of the first stars, crystallized will of the ancient stewards who'd watched over the young races. Only those with guardian blood could bond with a soul stone. The guardian lines had been extinct for 3,000 years. Impossible, Vrix whispered. The bride, the lady, finally spoke. Her voice was clear, carrying effortlessly through the vast chamber despite its softness. My name is Aria Vasquez. I am the daughter of Earth and the last daughter of the steward line. I come before you not as a conquered offering, but as an equal seeking alliance. I am the bride you accepted, Emperor Kaelthor Zhyren, and I am not what you expected. Her silver eyes never left his face. No, Kaelthor said slowly, his mind racing through implications, through political calculations, through centuries of carefully maintained power structures that were suddenly, terrifyingly uncertain. You are not. And for the first time in 100 years, Emperor Kaelthor Zhyren felt something other than cold indifference. He felt a chill of genuine fear. The silence in the throne chamber stretched like a living thing, pressing against the walls, suffocating the usual arrogance of the assembled court. Every eye was fixed on the silver-eyed woman standing at the base of the dais, the soul stone at her throat pulsing with rhythmic light that seemed to echo her heartbeat. Kaelthor's mind raced. The Guardian bloodlines were supposed to be extinct, hunted down during the Purge Wars 3 millennia ago, when the rising empires had decided that ancient peacekeepers had no place in an age of conquest. The Guardians had possessed abilities that defied conventional understanding. They could calm stellar storms, commune with star beasts, and most dangerously, they could see through deception. No lie could stand before a Guardian's gaze. No tyrant could hide their crimes. That's why they'd been eliminated. Or so the histories claimed. Preposterous! Lady Shara finally found her voice, though it trembled slightly. The Guardian lines ended centuries before the Zhyren Dynasty even rose. This is some human trick, some bauble they found in a ruin. Your radiance, you cannot possibly believe— The Soulstone cannot be fooled, interrupted a new voice. From the shadows at the chamber's edge stepped High Archivist Molthar, an ancient being who served as keeper of the Empire's historical records. His species lived for thousands of years, and Molthar had served 3 emperors before Kaelthor. His scaled form was hunched with age, his 6 eyes milky with cataracts, but his voice carried absolute authority. I have studied the codices. I have seen the recordings from the Age of Guardians. A soul stone bonds only with true-blooded descendants of the steward lines. It cannot be stolen, cannot be activated by the unworthy, cannot be faked. He shuffled forward, his movements painful to watch, until he stood just a few feet from Arya. He peered at the crystal with his dimming eyes, and something like wonder crossed his wrinkled features. "It responds to her life force," he whispered. "By the first stars. After 3,000 years, the bloodline survived." Arya stood perfectly still, allowing the ancient scholar his examination. Her expression remained neutral, but Kaelthor noticed the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her hands were clasped in front of her, not in submission, but in control. She was keeping herself calm through deliberate effort. She was afraid. Good. That made her sane. Only fools weren't afraid in a room full of predators. "How?" Kaelthor demanded, his voice cutting through the murmurs that had begun spreading through the court. The Guardians were hunted to extinction. Every world they fled to was burned. Every sanctuary was destroyed. How does Earth, a planet so far from the core worlds that we barely knew it existed, possess the last Guardian descendant? Elena stepped forward, her cane tapping against the floor. "Because Earth was where the last Guardians fled, Your Radiance. When the Purge Wars came, a small group of survivors escaped beyond the known sectors. They found our world, young, primitive, inhabited by early humans who were just beginning to understand fire and tools. The Guardians hid among us. They shared their knowledge, their wisdom, their blood. Over millennia, their power diluted, mixed with human genetics, became dormant." She placed a weathered hand on Arya's shoulder with obvious affection. "Until her. 3,000 years of dormancy," Molthar breathed, "and then spontaneous reactivation. The probability is astronomical." "Not spontaneous," Elena corrected. "When Arya was 7 years old, she touched a fragment of star metal that had fallen near her village. The moment her fingers brushed it, the metal liquefied and reformed into the soul stone you see now. It chose her, awakened the ancient blood sleeping in her veins." Arya finally spoke again, her voice steady despite the hundreds of hostile eyes upon her. "I didn't understand what I was. For years I thought I was cursed. My eyes changed color. I began to see things others couldn't. The truth beneath people's words, the emotions they tried to hide, the lies that shaped their lives. It was terrifying." Her silver gaze found Kaelthor's. "When your emissaries came to Earth seeking alliance through marriage, the Council chose me. Not because they wanted to be rid of me, but because Magistra Elena convinced them that the galaxy needs guardians again, that the age of endless war and conquest has brought us to the brink of mutual destruction, that perhaps an emperor who took a guardian as his bride might remember what peace looks like." "Peace." Commander Threk spat the word like a curse. "The weak cry for peace when they cannot fight." The Guardians fell because they tried to chain the strong with their moralizing, their lectures about balance and harmony. The galaxy evolved beyond their naive idealism. "The galaxy devolved into chaos," Arya countered quietly. "How many billions have died in the territorial wars of the last millennium? How many worlds have been reduced to ash? How many species have gone extinct not through natural selection, but through systematic genocide?" Her voice remained calm, but it carried through the chamber like a blade. "You call this evolution? I call it madness." "You dare?" Threk stepped forward, his 6 arms tensing, his warrior instincts clearly screaming to remove this threat. "Enough." Kaelthor's single word froze everyone in place. He rose from his throne, descending the dais steps with measured precision. The court parted automatically, giving him space, giving him deference. He moved until he stood directly before Arya, towering over her by nearly 4 feet. Up close, he could see the pulse in her throat, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. She was terrified, but she didn't look away. "You are either the bravest human in existence," he said softly, "or the most foolish. Perhaps both, Your Radiance." Despite himself, his lip twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. "Do you understand what you've done? By revealing your bloodline, you've made yourself the most valuable asset in the galaxy. Every empire, every warlord, every ambitious noble will want to possess you. Some will want to use your abilities. Others will want to ensure those abilities die with you. You've painted a target on your back that will never fade." "I know. Then why reveal yourself at all? You could have stayed hidden, remained a simple bride, irrelevant and forgotten." Arya's silver eyes seemed to deepen, to show layers of determination that belied her youth. "Because hiding changes nothing. The galaxy is tearing itself apart, and everyone pretends not to notice because they profit from the chaos. Someone needs to speak truth to power, Even if power refuses to listen, she stepped closer, a bold move that made several guards tense, their weapons humming to life. Kaelthor held up one hand, stopping them. Arya lowered her voice, speaking only to him now, her words meant for his ears alone. I see you, Kaelthor Zhyren. I see the weight you carry, the loneliness, the certainty that everyone around you is waiting for the moment to betray you, the walls you've built so high that even you can't remember what it feels like to trust anyone. Her words struck something deep in his chest, a place he'd thought long dead. You know nothing about me. I know what the Soul Stone shows me. She touched the crystal at her throat. Guardian blood grants many gifts, Your Radiance. One of them is the ability to see a person's true heart, beneath all the armor and pretense. And yours is not as dead as you believe. Kaelthor stared at her. Part of him wanted to dismiss this as manipulation, another gambit in the endless game of power. But the Soul Stone didn't lie. Couldn't lie. If she truly possessed guardian abilities, then she was seeing something in him that he'd hidden even from himself. The thought was terrifying. He stepped back, retreating behind his mask of imperial indifference. The treaty stands. You are my bride by contract, witnessed by the assembled court. The marriage ceremony will proceed as scheduled in 3 days. Until then, you will be housed in the East Tower, appropriate quarters for someone of your unique status. Magistra Elena will remain with you as your attendant. He turned to address the stunned court. Let it be known throughout the Empire. The Lady Arya Vasquez carries guardian blood and is under my personal protection. Any threat to her will be considered an act of war against the Zhyren Dynasty itself. Any attempt to harm her will result in the complete annihilation of the aggressor's entire bloodline. I do not make idle threats, the court murmured, a sound like distant thunder. Kaelthor saw the calculations happening behind their eyes, the alliances shifting, the schemes forming, the opportunities and dangers being weighed. He'd just declared Arya untouchable, which meant she'd become the fulcrum around which the Empire's political landscape would now rotate. It also meant he'd bound his fate to hers. Chancellor Vrix, see to their accommodations personally. High Archivist Molthar, I want every record we possess on the Guardians brought to my private study. Commander Threx, double the palace security. If even a whisper of assassination attempts reaches my ears, I will hold you personally responsible. Orders given, judgments made, the machinery of empire set into motion. This was what he knew. This was what he could control. Arya curtsied, a gesture he recognized from human customs, and Elena bowed again with that same quiet dignity. As they turned to follow Chancellor Vrix from the chamber, Arya glanced back once over her shoulder. Their eyes met across the distance. In hers, he saw something that made his carefully controlled world tilt on its axis. Not fear, not ambition, not even hope. Compassion. She pitied him. The throne chamber doors sealed behind her with a sound like a tomb closing. The East Tower had been built as a prison for high-ranking captives, comfortable enough to avoid martyrdom, isolated enough to ensure control. Its rooms were spacious but monitored, luxurious but locked. Arya stood at the window of her assigned chambers, looking out at the nebula swirling beyond the palace's transparent walls. Well, Elena said from behind her, settling into a chair with a grateful sigh, that could have gone worse. Arya turned from the window, finally allowing her carefully maintained composure to crack. She was shaking. I thought he was going to kill me when I spoke back to that commander. So did I, child. Elena's weathered face showed a small smile. But you held your ground. Your mother would have been proud. At the mention of her mother, Arya felt the familiar ache. She touched the soul stone at her throat. Her mother's last gift, though neither of them had known it at the time. The woman who'd raised her in a small village on Earth had died, never knowing she carried diluted guardian blood, had died thinking Arya's silver eyes were just a genetic quirk. It was only after her death, when Elena had found Arya living alone and struggling to understand the visions that plagued her, that the truth emerged. Magistra, do you think this will work? Any of it? The old woman was quiet for a long moment, her shrewd eyes studying Arya with the intensity that had first drawn her to the girl years ago. I think Emperor Kaelthor is more dangerous than any being I've ever encountered. I think this court is a nest of vipers who will smile at you while sharpening their knives. I think the empire he rules is built on foundations of blood and fear. That's not encouraging. But, Elena continued, I also think you saw something in him today. Something true. And if a guardian's sight shows a living heart beneath all that armor, then perhaps there's hope after all. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal not Chancellor Vrix, but High Archivist Molthar. The ancient scholar shuffled in, carrying a datapad that looked absurdly modern in his wrinkled claws. "Lady Arya," he said, his voice filled with reverence that made her deeply uncomfortable. "I must speak with you. There are questions I have studied for centuries, and you may be the only being alive who can answer them. I'm not sure I have any answers, Archivist. I barely understand what I am. Then perhaps we can learn together." He activated the datapad, and holographic images filled the air. Ancient scripts, star charts, recordings of beings that looked almost human, but whose eyes held the same silver light as Arya's. The Guardians were not just peacekeepers. They were bridge builders. They possessed the unique ability to bond with the galaxy's most ancient and powerful creatures, beings we now call the stellar worms, or star dragons. Arya's breath caught. Dragons? Not dragons as primitive myths describe them. These were living embodiments of stellar energy, creatures born in the hearts of dying stars. They possessed intelligence beyond our comprehension and power beyond our measurement. The Guardians alone could communicate with them, bond with them, even ride them across the void between worlds. He pulled up an image that made Arya gasp. It showed a massive creature, serpentine and magnificent, its body composed of what looked like solid starlight, wings that stretched across kilometers of space, eyes that burned with the fury of supernovas. "The last confirmed sighting of a stellar worm was 2,800 years ago," Molthar continued, "when the final Guardian stronghold fell. We assumed the dragons died with their bonded partners. But what if we were wrong? What if they simply went to sleep, waiting for Guardian blood to call them home? You think I could wake them?" Arya's voice came out as a whisper. "I think, Lady Arya, that your very existence may already be calling them. The Soul Stone is a beacon. If any stellar worms survived, they will sense it. They will come." Elena stood abruptly, her face pale. "Then she's in even greater danger than we thought. If the Empire's enemies learn that she could potentially command star dragons, they will stop at nothing to either control her or kill her," Molthar finished gravely. "Yes, which is why I came to warn you both. Trust no one in this court. The Emperor's protection is powerful, but it is not absolute. There are forces in play that even he cannot fully control." The ancient scholar moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Lady Arya, I am glad you exist. I had begun to believe that beauty and power could only be weapons in this galaxy. You remind me that once, long ago, they were gifts freely given." He left them in silence. Arya returned to the window, pressing her palm against the transparent wall. Somewhere out there, in the infinite dark between stars, were creatures of living light who might hear her heart's call. Somewhere in this palace was an emperor who ruled through fear but whose soul still remembered how to feel. And somewhere, invisible but inevitable, were assassins preparing their strikes. "Magistra," she said quietly, "I'm scared." "Good," Elena replied, coming to stand beside her. "Fear keeps you sharp, but don't let it stop you from doing what you came here to do." "And what's that?" The old woman smiled, the expression both sad and fierce. "Change everything." Outside the window, the nebula swirled in patterns that looked almost like wings, almost like a dragon beginning to wake. In his private study, surrounded by holographic displays showing every corner of his empire, Emperor Kaelthor Zhyren sat alone in the dark. He had dismissed all attendants, sealed all doors, deactivated all monitoring systems. For the first time in years, he was truly alone with his thoughts. The Guardian bloodline, alive, in his palace, bound to him by treaty and law, he should kill her. The strategic calculus was clear. She represented a threat to the established order, a wild-card variable that could destabilize everything he'd built. Her abilities made her unpredictable. Her bloodline made her a magnet for revolution, but he couldn't get her words out of his head. "I see you, Kaelthor Zhyren." No one saw him. No one dared. He was the Emperor, untouchable, unknowable, more symbol than person. He'd worked for centuries to become exactly that, a force of nature, not a man. And she'd looked past all of it in moments. He pulled up the security footage from the throne chamber, freezing on the moment when she'd stood revealed. Those silver eyes meeting his without flinching. The soul stone pulsing at her throat like a second heart. Beautiful. Dangerous. Utterly unlike anything he'd encountered in his long existence. His hands clenched on the armrests of his chair. 3 days until the ceremony. 3 days to decide if he would honor the treaty or find a way to eliminate the threat she represented. 3 days to figure out why the thought of her death made something in his chest tighten with emotion, he'd thought long dead. Outside his window, a shooting star streaked across the nebula's face, or perhaps it was something else, something with wings made of starlight and eyes that burned with ancient knowledge. The galaxy was about to change. And Kaelthor Zhyren, emperor of the Zhyren Dynasty, conqueror of 17 systems, was utterly unprepared for what was coming. The assassination attempt came on the second night. Arya woke to silence. Too much silence. The environmental systems that normally hummed in the background had gone quiet. The soft glow of security lights had been extinguished. Even the distant sounds of the palace, the subtle vibrations of a massive structure housing thousands, had ceased. Someone had isolated her chambers completely. She sat up slowly in the darkness, her heart hammering. Beside her bed, Elena slept on a smaller cot, her breathing deep and even. Too even. Arya reached out, touching the old woman's shoulder, and felt the unnatural coolness of her skin. Drugged, not dead, thank the stars, but deeply unconscious. The soul stone at Arya's throat began to pulse faster, its blue-white light intensifying. In its glow, she saw them. Shadows moving along the walls, figures that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Assassins wearing stealth technology that bent perception itself. There were 5 of them. "Lady Arya Vasquez," one whispered, his voice modulated to be unidentifiable. "You will come with us quietly, or your guardian will stop breathing permanently. Your choice." Arya's mind raced. Guardian blood gave her certain abilities: truth sight, emotional reading, an instinctive understanding of living things. But it didn't make her a warrior. She had no combat training, no weapons, no way to fight 5 professional killers. She had only one asset, the Soul Stone, and she had no idea how to use it. "Please," she thought desperately, her hand closing around the crystal. "If you're really connected to the ancient guardians, if you're really a fragment of the first stars, help me. Show me what to do." The Soul Stone flared. Light exploded from the crystal. Not the soft glow it had shown before, but a brilliant, searing radiance that filled the chamber like a newborn sun. The assassins recoiled, their stealth fields failing, their forms revealed. Arya saw them clearly now. Korthaxian shock troops, their exoskeletons modified for infiltration, their weapons designed for silent killing. But the light did more than reveal them. It pushed them back. Arya felt power flowing through her, ancient and vast, like tapping into a river that had run since the universe began. The Soul Stone wasn't just a marker of her bloodline. It was a conduit, a connection to something far greater than herself. "Impossible!" one assassin gasped. "She's untrained. She shouldn't be able to—" The light intensified. Arya stood from her bed, and though she wore only a simple sleeping gown, though she was unarmed and alone, she felt the weight of 3,000 years of guardian heritage settling onto her shoulders like an invisible crown. "You were sent to kill me," she said, her voice echoing with harmonics that weren't entirely her own. "Who paid you?" "We don't answer to humans." "Answer." The word came out with force that shook the walls. The Soul Stone's light became blinding, and Arya felt something else stirring, something responding to her desperate call from far beyond the palace walls, something vast and ancient that had been sleeping in the void, waiting for a guardian's voice to wake it. The assassins felt it too. Their confidence crumbled into terror. "The Consortium," one of them broke. "The Merchant Consortium. They offered 50 million credits for your death. Said you're bad for business. Said the Empire doesn't need the chaos a guardian would bring. Please, make it stop." But Arya couldn't stop it. The power flowing through the Soul Stone was building, responding to her fear and desperation with increasing intensity. The chamber's walls began to crack. The transparent sections overlooking the nebula started to fracture. "Too much," Arya thought frantically. "I don't know how to control this." The wall exploded inward, not from the assassin's weapons, not from the Soul Stone's power, from outside. Something massive crashed through the palace's outer hull with a sound like reality tearing. Klaxons screamed. Emergency bulkheads began sealing throughout the structure, and through the massive breach in the tower wall came a creature out of legend. The stellar worm was smaller than the ones in Molthar's recordings, perhaps only 50 feet long instead of kilometers, but it was no less magnificent. Its body was composed of solidified starlight, scales that looked like crystallized galaxies, eyes that burned with the blue-white fire of young suns. Wings made of pure energy spread across the chamber, and when it opened its mouth, cosmic wind poured forth, carrying the scent of distant nebulas. The dragon looked at Arya. Arya looked at the dragon, and something clicked into place. A bond that transcended language, transcended species, transcended time itself. She felt its mind touch hers, ancient, curious, amused. Little guardian. A voice resonated in her thoughts, neither male nor female, neither young nor old. You called so loudly. How could I not answer? The assassins were screaming now, trying to flee, but the dragon was faster. A wing made of living light swept across the chamber, and the 5 killers were frozen in place, suspended in stasis fields that would hold them until authorities arrived. You are afraid, the dragon observed, its massive head tilting as it studied Arya. Good. Fear means you respect the power you've awakened. But you called me, little one. Whether you meant to or not, you are now bonded to me. I am Zhyren, last daughter of the Twilight Nebula, and you are my guardian. I don't understand, Arya whispered, trembling as adrenaline finally caught up with her. I don't know how to be a guardian. I don't know how to do any of this. Then you will learn, as all young things learn, by doing, by failing, by trying again. Zhyren's eyes softened, their burning intensity dimming to something almost gentle. You have the heart for it. I can feel it. That is rarer than the bloodline itself. Footsteps thundered in the corridor outside. The sealed door exploded inward, and Emperor Kaelthor burst through, flanked by Commander Threx and a full squad of elite guards. He wore minimal armor, as if he'd responded immediately upon hearing the alarms, and his 4 eyes blazed with fury. Lady Arya! He stopped dead, seeing the dragon. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Kaelthor's hand slowly moved away from his weapon. A stellar worm, he said quietly, awe creeping into his voice despite his obvious attempt to maintain control. By the first stars, the records were true. Emperor of the Zhyren Dynasty. Zhyren's voice filled everyone's mind simultaneously, making several guards stumble. You bound yourself to this guardian through marriage contract. Know that her bonds are now my bonds. Harm her, and you will answer to me. Protect her, and you will have my allegiance. Choose wisely. Kaelthor's jaw tightened, but he inclined his head. Not a bow, but an acknowledgement of power. The Lady Arya is under my protection. Those who attempted to harm her will face imperial justice. Good. The dragon's attention shifted to the frozen assassins. These spoke of a merchant consortium. You have traitors within your empire, Emperor. Perhaps your guardian bride will help you find them. With that, Zhyren began to shrink. The massive form compressed, folded in on itself, became streamers of light that spiraled inward toward Arya's soul stone. In seconds, the dragon had vanished completely, or rather, had merged with the crystal at her throat. The soul stone now pulsed with colors it hadn't shown before. Deep blues and purples, swirling like captured nebulas. Arya's knees buckled. Kaelthor caught her before she hit the ground, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as they supported her weight. I've got you, he said quietly. She looked up at him, exhausted and overwhelmed, and saw something in his expression that hadn't been there before. Not just concern for a political asset, something more personal, more afraid. Elena, she gasped. They drugged her. Medical team now, Kaelthor barked. Guards rushed to the old woman's side, scanners analyzing her condition. She'll be fine. Whatever they used was meant to incapacitate, not kill. They wanted you alive. The consortium, Arya said, trying to focus through the fog of exhaustion. They want me dead because they think I'll disrupt. What did they say? Chaos that's good for business? Kaelthor's expression hardened. The merchant consortium profits from war. They sell weapons to all sides, finance conflicts, ensure that peace never lasts long enough to hurt their bottom line. A guardian who could enforce peace, who could see through lies and expose war profiteers. He nodded slowly. Yes. You're a direct threat to their empire within my empire. Commander Threx approached, his 6 arms tense. Your radiance, with respect, this changes everything. A bonded stellar worm means the Lady Arya possesses military assets beyond anything we anticipated. The other powers will react. Let them react, Kaelthor interrupted. Let the whole galaxy know. The Zhyren Dynasty has reclaimed the ancient bonds. We have a guardian. We have a star dragon. And we will use both to remind everyone why my bloodline rules. He looked down at Arya, still held in his arms. Can you stand? She nodded, and he carefully set her on her feet, though he kept one hand on her shoulder to steady her. The touch was brief, professional, but Arya felt something pass between them. an acknowledgement that they were no longer just political pawns in a treaty marriage. They were now bound by something far more dangerous. The wedding will proceed as scheduled tomorrow, Kaelthor announced. Not in 3 days, tomorrow, before the consortium or anyone else can make another move. Lady Arya will become my empress, and any attack on her will be an attack on the throne itself. Your Radiance, Arya said softly, finding her voice despite her exhaustion. You don't have to accelerate the ceremony to protect me. I know this marriage is political. I know you didn't want. What I want is irrelevant. His voice was harsh, but his eyes betrayed something else. What matters is stability, strategy, control. He's lying. Zhyren's voice whispered in Arya's mind, drowsy but amused. Even I can feel it, and I've only been awake an hour. He's afraid for you, little guardian. Afraid of what he's beginning to feel. Arya said nothing, but she met Kaelthor's gaze and saw the truth there. The cracks in his carefully constructed armor. The humanity he'd spent centuries trying to bury. Tomorrow then, she agreed quietly. Medical teams arrived, carefully transferring Elena to a mobile unit. The old woman was already beginning to stir, the drugs wearing off faster than expected. Her first blurry-eyed look was for Arya, and she relaxed only when she saw her charge standing, alive, protected. You called a dragon, Elena slurred, still half unconscious. On your second day. Overachiever. Despite everything, Arya felt a laugh bubble up, slightly hysterical, but genuine. I had help. As the medical team carried Elena away for proper treatment, Kaelthor began issuing a rapid series of commands. Increase security throughout the palace, interrogate the assassins, initiate a full investigation of consortium activities within Imperial space, accelerate wedding preparations, notify the court that the ceremony would take place at dawn. Arya watched him work, saw the machine of Empire respond to his will with terrifying efficiency. This was his world. Power exercised with precision, control maintained through force of will and carefully calculated consequences. But she'd also seen the moment when he'd burst through the door, fear naked on his face. She'd felt his hands catch her with a gentleness that contradicted every ruthless decision he'd ever made. The galaxy thought Emperor Kaelthor Zhyren was a monster. Arya was beginning to suspect he was something far more complex and far more dangerous, a monster who'd forgotten how to be anything else. Your new quarters are being prepared, Kaelthor said, turning back to her. Triple security, Guardian-grade shielding, direct connection to my private chambers. You'll be safe there. Until the next attempt. There won't be a next attempt. His voice held absolute certainty. I'm making an example of the consortium. By morning, every being in the galaxy will know the cost of threatening my empress. Empress. The word hung between them. Kaelthor, Arya said quietly, using his name without title for the first time. He tensed at the familiarity, but didn't correct her. Why did you really accept Earth's offer? You didn't know about my bloodline. You expected a nobody, someone irrelevant. So why go through with it at all? For a long moment, he was silent. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low only she could hear it. Because every empire I've studied eventually falls from within. Because I've spent 300 years watching my own court slowly poison itself with greed and ambition. Because I'm tired. He met her eyes. You asked in the throne chamber if I remembered what peace looks like. The truth is, I never knew. I was born into war, raised for conquest, crowned in blood. I accepted your world's offer because some small, stubborn part of me wondered if humans, with your short lives and your persistent, idiotic hope, might remember something I never learned. His honesty struck her like a physical blow. This was the truth the Soul Stone had shown her. The loneliness, the exhaustion, the desperate hunger for something beyond the endless cycle of power and betrayal. I don't have answers, Arya said. I'm just as lost as you are. Then we'll be lost together. He turned away, his mask of imperial authority snapping back into place. Get some rest. Tomorrow you become an empress. The day after, we start the work of surviving what that means. He left her with a squad of guards, with servants beginning to clean up the destroyed chamber, with the knowledge that she'd bonded with a stellar worm and survived her first assassination attempt, and with the growing certainty that the hardest battle wouldn't be against external enemies. It would be breaking through the walls of the most heavily defended heart in the galaxy. Dawn came to the Eternity's Fang as a programmed event, the palace's vast windows allowing filtered light from the nearby star to sweep across the structure in a simulation of sunrise. In a meditation chamber deep in the East Tower, Arya stood motionless as servants prepared her for the ceremony. The wedding gown was a masterpiece, white silk that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light, reinforced with threads of star metal that made it nearly indestructible while remaining impossibly delicate. The train was 15 feet long, embroidered with constellations in silver thread. The veil was made of something the servants called morning mist, a fabric woven from solidified light particles that seemed to exist only half in physical reality. Elena stood nearby, recovered from the drugging but moving stiffly. She watched the preparations with a grandmother's pride mixed with warrior's wariness. "You ready for this, child?" "No," Arya admitted. "But I don't think anyone's ever ready to marry an emperor they met 3 days ago. 3 days during which you revealed Guardian bloodline, survived an assassination attempt, and bonded with a star dragon." Elena smiled. "At this rate, by your first anniversary, you'll have solved intergalactic peace and discovered the secret of immortality." Arya laughed, despite her nerves. "Let's just focus on surviving the wedding." "Don't worry," Zhyren's voice whispered from the Soul Stone. "I'm watching. If anyone tries anything during the ceremony, I'll eat them." "Please don't eat anyone at my wedding," Arya murmured. "No promises." The servants finished their work and stepped back. Arya turned to face a full-length mirror and barely recognized herself. The gown transformed her from a village girl into something that looked almost otherworldly. Her silver eyes seemed to glow against the white fabric. The soul stone at her throat, now pulsing with captured dragon light, looked less like jewelry and more like a second heart. She looked like a guardian. She looked like an empress. She felt like a terrified 25-year-old who was in far over her head. "Time to go," Elena said gently. "Your emperor awaits." The ceremony was being held in the Grand Cathedral, a section of the palace reserved for the most sacred rituals of state. When Arya entered, she found it filled with representatives from across the empire. Word had spread fast. What was supposed to be a minor political wedding had transformed overnight into the most significant event in galactic politics in centuries. The cathedral itself was breathtaking, a vast space where the walls, floor, and ceiling were all transparent, giving the impression of floating in the void itself. Stars surrounded them on all sides. At the far end, on a raised platform carved from a single massive diamond, Emperor Kaelthor waited. He wore full ceremonial armor, black and crimson, every plate inscribed with the names of his conquered worlds. The crown of stars sat upon his horned head, a circle of captured stellar material that pulsed with contained power. He looked every inch the conquering emperor, the apex predator, the being who'd brought 17 civilizations to their knees. But when Arya began her slow walk down the aisle, his eyes found hers, and she saw past the armor. He was as terrified as she was. The realization steadied her. They were both pretending to be something larger than themselves, both wearing crowns, literal and metaphorical, that were almost too heavy to bear. The ceremony itself was conducted in the Old Tongue, the language that predated all current empires. High Archivist Malthar officiated, his ancient voice carrying through the vast space without amplification. Arya barely heard the words. She was too focused on Kaelthor's face, on the micro-expressions that flickered across his features as they spoke vows that bound their fates together. When it came time to exchange tokens, Kaelthor produced a ring, a band of dark metal inscribed with stars. As he slid it onto her finger, she felt warmth spread from the metal into her skin, some kind of protective enchantment, she realized. He'd had it specially made to shield her. Her gift to him was simpler, a small crystal that Elena had helped her create, using guardian techniques she'd barely understood. It contained a fragment of her own life force, not enough to harm her, but enough that Kaelthor would always be able to sense if she was in danger. "So you'll know if I need you," she whispered, as she pressed it into his palm. His fingers closed around it with a grip that looked almost desperate. "By the power vested in me by the first laws and the ancient codes," Malthar intoned, "I declare this bond sealed. Emperor and Empress, 2 lives, 1 throne. May the stars witness and remember." Kaelthor lifted her veil. For a moment, they just looked at each other, truly looked, without the barriers of politics or performance. 2 people who'd been thrust together by fate and circumstance, bound by contracts and prophecies, carrying weights they'd never asked for. Then he leaned down, had to lean far down given their height difference, and kissed her. It was meant to be ceremonial, brief, symbolic. Instead, it felt like touching lightning. Arya gasped against his mouth, feeling power surge between them. his darkness and her light, his control and her chaos, mixing and merging in ways that defied easy categorization. The soul stone flared. Zhyren stirred within the crystal, startled by the intensity of the connection. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Arya saw something in Kaelthor's eyes that made her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear, hunger, recognition. The terrifying awareness that they'd just bound themselves to something far more powerful and far more dangerous than either had anticipated. The court erupted in applause, required rather than genuine, but deafening nonetheless. Arya Vasquez was now Empress Arya Zhyren, and the galaxy would never be the same. The celebration feast was an exercise in carefully orchestrated hostility. In the Grand Hall, a space designed to intimidate visiting dignitaries with its sheer scale and opulence, hundreds of the galaxy's elite gathered to toast the new Empress. Crystal chandeliers the size of starships hung overhead, each one containing captured light from a different conquered sun. The tables were carved from the heartwood of extinct world trees. The plates were forged from metals found only in the cores of dead planets. Everything in the Zhyren Dynasty spoke of death repurposed as beauty. Arya sat beside Kaelthor at the high table, her new husband's massive form a constant presence at her right side. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her, calculating, assessing, searching for weakness. The court had accepted her existence as Empress because they had no choice. They hadn't accepted her as anything more than a temporary inconvenience. "You're not eating," Kaelthor observed quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. Show weakness here, and they'll interpret it as permission to strike." He cut a piece of some alien delicacy on her plate with his own knife and held it out to her, a gesture that could be read as either tender care or imperial command. "That's not a request, Empress." The title still felt foreign. Arya accepted the offered food, acutely aware that every gesture they made was being analyzed for political significance. A simple meal had become theater. Across the hall, Lady Shara held court among a cluster of Korthaxian nobles, her gem-studded carapace glittering as she gestured animatedly. Arya didn't need guardian abilities to read the hostility in every movement. The lady had expected to position her own daughter as a potential future empress. A human bride, even a guardian, was a direct threat to those ambitions. The consortium representatives didn't attend, Arya noted, observing the empty seats at several key tables. "No, they're currently being detained while my inquisitors investigate their connections to last night's assassination attempt." Kaelthor's tone was casual, but his eyes were hard. 3 of their senior merchants have already confessed to funding the operation. They'll be executed publicly tomorrow. Arya's stomach turned. "Execution? They tried to kill my empress. Did you expect mercy? I expected a trial, due process, something other than summary execution." Kaelthor set down his goblet with enough force that nearby conversations faltered. "This isn't Earth, Arya. We don't have the luxury of your idealistic legal systems. Show weakness to those who would destroy you, and they'll simply try again with better planning. The only language power understands is consequences, swift, brutal, final. And does that make you different from the tyrants the Guardians once fought?" The question hung in the air between them like a blade. Kaelthor's 4 eyes narrowed, and for a moment Arya wondered if she'd pushed too far, too fast. Around them, the nearest courtiers had gone silent, straining to hear the exchange between Emperor and Empress. Then, surprisingly, Kaelthor laughed, a sound without humor, but genuine nonetheless. "No, it makes me exactly what the Guardians fought, which is why they lost." He leaned closer, his voice dropping even lower. "You want to change the Empire from within? Fine. But understand this. Every mercy you show will be perceived as weakness. Every hesitation will be exploited. The moment they believe you're soft, they'll tear you apart. Then I'll have to prove I'm not soft without becoming what they are. Good luck with that." Before Arya could respond, High Archivist Molthar approached the high table, moving with the careful slowness of someone who'd learned that sudden movements attracted unwanted attention in this court. He bowed deeply to both of them. "Your Radiances, forgive the interruption. There is a matter that requires immediate attention." "Speak," Kaelthor commanded. "The interrogation of the captured assassins has yielded concerning information." They claimed the consortium was merely the funding source. The operational planning came from someone within the palace, someone with access to the tower's security systems, knowledge of the Empress's schedule, and authority to disable monitoring equipment. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Kaelthor's expression went from merely dangerous to absolutely lethal. A traitor in my own court. So it would appear, Your Radiance. Do we have a name? Not yet. The assassins were compartmentalized. They knew only their immediate handler, who provided instructions through encrypted channels. But my analysts believe the level of access required narrows the suspect pool considerably. Molthar glanced at Arya, something like apology in his ancient eyes. Your Radiance, Empress, your guardian abilities. If you were to question the suspects directly, could you identify the traitor through their deception? All eyes turned to Arya. She felt the weight of expectation, of hope, of the fear that she would prove inadequate to the power she supposedly possessed. In truth, she'd barely begun to understand her abilities. The Soul Stone responded to her emotions, to desperation, to need, but she had no training, no control, no certainty that she could call upon it at will. But she also understood what Molthar was really asking: prove your worth, or watch the court's skepticism harden into open opposition. I can try, she said carefully, but I make no promises. I'm still learning what I can do. Unacceptable, Commander Threx rumbled from his position near the hall's entrance. We cannot trust Imperial security to an untrained human playing at Guardian powers. Let my interrogators work. We'll extract the truth through proven methods. Torture, Arya said flatly. Enhanced interrogation, which is a polite term for torture. Threx's 6 arms flexed in a gesture that looked distinctly threatening. With respect, Empress, you've been in this empire for 3 days. Don't presume to lecture us on methods that have kept it stable for centuries. He fears you. Zhyren's voice whispered in Arya's mind. The warrior sees a threat to the order he serves. He would prefer you dead but settled for marginalized. Don't back down now. Arya stood from her chair, a deliberate choice, even though it meant she had to look up at nearly everyone in the room. Commander Threx, I understand your concerns, but if I'm to be Empress, if I'm to use my abilities to serve this empire, I need to learn through practice. Give me 1 suspect, 1 interview. If I fail, you can return to your enhanced interrogation. If I succeed, we save time and avoid potentially destroying evidence through aggressive methods. Kaelthor watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Was that pride, approval, or simply calculation about how to use this confrontation to his advantage? 1 suspect, he said finally, his voice carrying absolute authority. You have 1 hour, Empress. Molthar will provide you with someone from the suspect pool. Commander Threx, you'll observe through monitoring equipment but will not interfere. Lady Arya will conduct the interview her way. He stood as well, towering over her but positioning himself slightly behind, a subtle message to the court. She leads, I support. Challenge her. Challenge us both. The feast continues, Kaelthor announced to the assembled court. Enjoy the celebration. The Empress and I have work to do. The interrogation chamber was deliberately cruel in its simplicity. White walls, white floor, white ceiling, all designed to prevent the subject from having any visual reference points, any psychological anchors. A single chair sat in the center, currently occupied by a slender figure in restraints. Arya recognized her immediately. Counselor Vess, a junior member of the Imperial Advisory Council. She was Kivari, a species known for their telepathic sensitivity and their distinctive opalescent skin that shifted colors based on emotional state. Right now, Vess's skin was cycling rapidly through blues and greens, fear and confusion. Empress, Vess said, her voice trembling. I don't understand why I'm here. I've done nothing wrong. Arya settled into the chair across from her, acutely aware of Kaelthor standing in the shadows near the door and Commander Threx observing through the monitoring system. The soul stone at her throat pulsed gently, responding to her heartbeat. Counselor Vess, you have access to the East Tower's security systems. You attended the strategy session where my quarters were assigned, and according to financial records, you recently received a payment of 200,000 credits from an untraceable account. These facts make you a person of interest in the investigation of my attempted assassination. Vess's skin flashed bright yellow. Shock. That payment was for consulting work. I help smaller systems optimize their trade agreements. It's perfectly legal. Then you won't mind if we trace the account. You can't! The outburst came too quickly, too desperately. Vess seemed to realize her mistake immediately. I mean, my clients expect confidentiality, standard practice in trade consultation. Arya leaned forward, letting the Soul Stone's light intensify slightly. She wasn't sure exactly what she was doing, acting on instinct, on the faint whispers of inherited memory that seemed to bubble up from the crystal itself. Counselor, I'm going to try something. It might feel uncomfortable, but it won't harm you. I need you to look at me. Directly at me. I don't... That wasn't a request. Vess's eyes met Arya's, and the moment the connection was established, Arya felt the world shift. It was like diving beneath the surface of still water. Suddenly she could see depths that had been invisible from above. Vess's surface thoughts, her immediate emotions, the architecture of her psyche laid bare. She's terrified, Arya realized. But not of me. Of something else. Someone else. You're hiding something, Arya said softly. But you're not the traitor we're looking for. You're protecting someone. Someone you fear more than you fear the Emperor's wrath. Vess's skin went pure white. Absolute terror. Please, she whispered. Please don't make me say it. They'll kill my family. My entire bloodline. That was the threat. Cooperate or everyone I love dies. There it was. The crack in the facade. Who threatened you, counselor? I can't. The soulstone flared brighter, and Arya felt power flowing through her with greater intensity. This time, she didn't just read surface emotions. She pushed deeper, searching for the memory Vess was desperately trying to hide. She saw it. A conversation in shadows, a figure whose features were deliberately obscured by technology, but whose voice was distinctive, female, aristocratic, Korthaxian, Lady Shara. Arya pulled back from the connection, breathing hard. The power use had drained her more than she'd expected. Beside her chair, Kaelthor moved forward, his hand settling on her shoulder in a gesture of support that was probably unconscious. She's telling the truth, Arya said, her voice hoarse. She was coerced, forced to provide security access codes and scheduling information under threat to her family. But she's not the primary conspirator. Then who is? Commander Threx's voice crackled through the speaker system. Arya looked up at Kaelthor. Lady Shara. She's the one who coordinated with the consortium. She wants me dead because I threaten her family's position in the court hierarchy. For a long moment, Kaelthor said nothing. His face was unreadable, but his hand on Arya's shoulder tightened slightly. Then he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of absolute power. Commander Threx, arrest Lady Shara and her entire household. No one leaves the palace. Counselor Vess, you'll be placed in protective custody along with your family until we've verified the threats against them were real. Your radiance, Vess sobbed with relief. Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If the Empress's reading is wrong, if you're lying, I'll space you and everyone you love. Clear? Crystal your radiance. Kaelthor guided Arya from the interrogation chamber, his hand still on her shoulder. Once they were in the private corridor outside, away from monitoring equipment and potential witnesses, he stopped and turned her to face him. How confident are you in that reading? 90%, Arya admitted. Maybe 95. I saw the memory clearly, but guardian abilities aren't infallible. Vess could have been manipulated to believe it was Lady Shara when it was actually someone else using her voice and appearance. 95% is enough. He studied her face with an intensity that made her acutely aware of how close they were standing. You're exhausted. Using the soulstone that intensely without training is dangerous. I'll be fine. You're swaying on your feet, Empress. You're not fine. He made a decision, scooping her up before she could protest. We're returning to our quarters. You need rest. I can walk. No, you can't. Stop being stubborn and let me help you. It should have been humiliating, being carried through the palace corridors like a child. Instead, Arya found herself relaxing against Kaelthor's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat through his armor. He smelled like ozone and something darker, something that reminded her of deep space. Our quarters? She asked quietly. You're my Empress now. That means we share living space. The Imperial Suite, most secure location in the palace. He glanced down at her. Unless you'd prefer separate chambers? The question held unexpected vulnerability. He was giving her an out, a chance to maintain distance despite their marriage. Part of Arya wanted to take it, to retreat to safety, to avoid the dangerous intimacy of sharing space with a man who terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. But guardians didn't become guardians by choosing safety. Our quarters is fine, she said. Something in his expression softened, just for a moment, before the Imperial mask returned. Good, because you'll need to be nearby when Lady Shara's arrest triggers whatever contingency plans she's undoubtedly prepared. High-ranking nobles don't go down quietly in this empire. She'll fight back. Of course she will. The Korthaxian families are ancient, proud, and absolutely ruthless, Taking down one of their matriarchs is essentially declaring war on a significant faction within the court. He navigated through a series of security checkpoints, each one requiring biometric scans that recognized him instantly, which is why we need to be ready for whatever comes next. The Imperial Suite was less a set of rooms, and more a small palace within the palace. Vast windows overlooked the nebula, their transparent walls showing the swirling cosmic dance of gas and newborn stars. The furnishings were simultaneously luxurious and sparse. Everything was high quality, but there was a distinct lack of personal touches. This was a space designed for an emperor, not a person. Kaelthor carried Arya to a bedroom that was clearly meant to be hers. The servants had already transferred her meager belongings from the East Tower and arranged them with careful precision. He set her down on a bed that could have comfortably held 5 people her size. "Rest," he commanded. "I'll post guards outside your door and—" "Stay." The word surprised them both. Kaelthor froze. "Arya, I know this marriage is political. I know you didn't choose this any more than I did, but we're in this together now, and I don't want to be alone tonight." She met his eyes, letting him see her fear and her determination in equal measure. "Stay. Just be here, please." For a long moment, he warred with himself. She could see it in his face, the conflict between his carefully maintained distance and the pull of something he'd denied himself for centuries. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I'll stay." He removed his ceremonial armor piece by piece, revealing the form beneath, still massive, still intimidating, but somehow more real without the trappings of imperial power. He settled into a chair near the window, his eyes on the nebula beyond. Arya lay back against the pillows, exhaustion pulling at her like a physical weight. But before sleep could claim her, she had to ask, "Why did you really accept Earth's offer, Kaelthor? And don't give me the strategic answer. Tell me the truth." Silence stretched between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. "Because I'm tired of being alone. Because 300 years of ruling an empire hasn't filled the emptiness. Because I thought, maybe, if I bound myself to someone who wasn't born into this nightmare of power and betrayal, I might remember what it feels like to be something other than a weapon." He turned to look at her. "I didn't expect you to be a guardian. Didn't expect you to be beautiful or brave or capable of looking at me like I'm a person instead of a monster. I expected a transaction. Instead, I got a complication," Arya finished. "A miracle." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning, dangerous with possibility. Arya's eyes grew heavy, sleep finally claiming her. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Kaelthor watching over her, the starlight from the nebula casting shadows across his face that made him look almost vulnerable, almost human. The arrest of Lady Shara happened at midnight, a deliberate choice designed to maximize psychological impact. Commander Threx led a full combat squad to the Korthaxian wing of the palace, expecting resistance. He got it. Lady Shara's household guards were some of the finest warriors credits could buy. Vrakesh mercenaries augmented with illegal cybernetics, Feltari assassins who could phase through solid matter, and 3 Korthaxian blade masters whose skills were legendary throughout the empire. The battle was brief, but brutal, leaving 7 of Threx's soldiers dead, and twice that many wounded. When they finally breached Lady Shara's private chambers, they found her sitting calmly at her desk, wearing full court regalia as if dressed for execution. "Commander," she said pleasantly, her carapace glittering with stolen wealth. "I assume you've come to arrest me on the word of that human girl?" "On the word of the Empress," Threx corrected coldly, "and on evidence gathered from multiple sources confirming your conspiracy to commit imperial murder." "How dramatic!" Lady Shara stood with fluid grace. "Tell me, Commander, do you really believe she saw the truth? Or do you think perhaps she saw what she wanted to see, a convenient scapegoat for her own insecurities? I think the Empress has abilities you can't comprehend and wouldn't believe if you did. I believe she's a clever manipulator who's convinced the Emperor to destroy his most loyal supporters." Lady Shara smiled, showing rows of crystalline teeth. "But no matter. Take me to your cells. Put me on trial. Let's see if your guardian Empress can prove her accusations when I have legal counsel and the full protection of Korthaxian law." Threx signaled his troops. As they moved to restrain Lady Shara, she triggered something, a device hidden in her jewelry that released a pulse of electromagnetic energy. Every piece of monitoring equipment in the room died instantly. Every recording device. Every witness except those physically present. And in that moment of darkness, Lady Shara spoke directly to Threx. "The Korthaxian families remember, Commander. We remember when your species were warriors for hire, barely more than animals. We remember who elevated you, who gave you honor and position within the empire. Cross us now, and when the human empress is dead and forgotten, you'll find yourself without allies. Is that a threat, Lady Shara? It's a promise. She extended her arms for the restraints. Now take me to my cell. Let's begin this farce. Kaelthor received the report of Lady Shara's arrest in the dead hours of the night. He'd remained in Arya's chamber, true to his word, watching over her sleep while his empire continued its machinations around him. Now he stood at the window, reading Commander Threx's encrypted message, and felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settling onto his shoulders. Behind him, Arya stirred in her sleep, murmuring something he couldn't quite hear. She looked so young in the starlight, so vulnerable. It was easy to forget she carried guardian blood, easy to see only the human woman who'd been thrust into a nightmare and was somehow surviving through sheer will. Easy to forget she was his weapon against the darkness. Easier still to forget she was supposed to be just a political tool. Lady Shara's arrest would fracture the court. The Korthaxian families would demand evidence, demand trials, demand blood for blood if their matriarch was executed. Half the noble houses would side with them out of fear or profit. The empire could tear itself apart over this, and all of it hinged on whether an untrained guardian's vision could be trusted. Kaelthor looked at his sleeping bride and wondered, not for the first time, if he'd made a terrible mistake, or if he'd finally made the right choice. She'll change everything, Zhyren's voice whispered directly into his mind, startling, since the dragon had never spoken to him before. That's what terrifies you. Not that she'll fail, but that she'll succeed, that she'll show you a different way to rule, and you'll have to admit every choice you've made was wrong. Kaelthor said nothing, but his hand unconsciously moved to his chest, where the crystal Arya had given him pulsed with her life force. Outside the window, stars wheeled in their eternal dance, and somewhere in the depths of space, drawn by the Guardian's call, more stellar worms were beginning to wake. The galaxy was about to change, whether Kaelthor, or anyone else, was ready or not. The trial began at dawn, but the battle for the Empire had started hours earlier. Arya woke to chaos, alarms screaming, guards shouting, the sound of energy weapons discharging somewhere deep in the palace. Kaelthor was already armored and armed, standing at the window with an expression that could have frozen stars. "What's happening?" she asked, throwing off the covers. "Civil war, in miniature." His voice was cold, controlled, but she heard the fury beneath it. 3 Korthaxian noble houses have declared the arrest of Lady Shara illegal and are demanding her immediate release. They've seized control of dock stations 7 through 12 and are threatening to secede from the Empire unless I yield. They can do that? They can try. They won't succeed, but they can cause enough damage that the Empire bleeds resources for decades. He turned to face her. This is what I warned you about. Mercy, hesitation, justice, these are luxuries we can't afford. If I'd simply executed Lady Shara without trial, this wouldn't be happening. Arya stood, her mind racing. If you'd executed her without trial, you'd have proven every criticism the Korthaxian houses have ever leveled against you. You'd be the tyrant they claim you are. I am the tyrant they claim I am. No. She crossed to him, placing her hand on his armored chest. You're an emperor who inherited a broken system and has been trying to hold it together through force because you've never known any other way. But force alone won't work anymore. The galaxy is changing whether you want it to or not. She's right, Zhyren whispered in both their minds. The old ways are dying. You can die with them, Emperor, or you can evolve. Kaelthor's jaw tightened. And if evolving means losing everything I've built, then maybe, Arya said softly, what you've built needs to fall so something better can rise. Before he could respond, High Archivist Molthar burst through the door, his ancient form moving with uncharacteristic urgency. Your Radiances, the situation is worse than we thought. The Korthaxian houses aren't acting alone. We've detected consortium warships on the edge of the system. They're using the civil unrest as cover to position for a full assault. How many ships? Kaelthor demanded. 17 confirmed, possibly more in stealth configuration. Arya felt her blood run cold. 17 warships. The consortium was willing to risk open war with the Empire over her existence. Not just because she threatened their profits, but because what she represented was anathema to everything they'd built. A guardian could see through lies, expose corruption, unite factions that profit relied on keeping divided. She was an extinction-level event for their entire business model. Evacuation protocols? Kaelthor asked, already moving toward the command center. Initiated, but we have over 50,000 beings on the palace station. Full evacuation will take 6 hours minimum. We don't have 6 hours. Kaelthor's hands clenched into fists. Activate the defense grid. Scramble all available fighters. Send word to the 4th Fleet. I want them in system within 30 minutes or I'll space their commanders. Your Radiance, Molthar said carefully. The Korthaxian forces control several of our defensive stations. They're refusing to activate weapons against the consortium ships. They're claiming the consortium is here to liberate the Empire from Guardian influence. Silence fell like a blade. Arya understood instantly. This wasn't just an assassination attempt anymore. This was a coordinated coup. The consortium and the Korthaxian houses had allied to remove both her and Kaelthor in a single strike. They would install a puppet emperor, someone they could control, and return the Empire to the profitable chaos of endless war. They're going to destroy the palace, she whispered. They're going to kill everyone here and blame it on Guardian powers gone wild. Paint me as a monster who forced you into a doomed marriage. Yes, Kaelthor's voice was flat. Quite clever, actually. They eliminate us, fracture the Empire, and profit from the reconstruction. Standard consortium playbook. He turned to face her fully, and in his eyes she saw a decision being made. Arya, there's an escape ship in the Imperial dock. Small, fast, invisible to most scanning systems. I can get you out. Elena too, you'll be safe. And you? I'll stay. Fight. Die if necessary. But I won't let them win easily. No. Zhyren's voice rang with absolute certainty. This is wrong. You're both thinking too small. You're playing their game by their rules. What choice do we have? Arya asked aloud, not caring that Kaelthor looked startled that she was speaking to the dragon. We can't fight 17 warships with a divided defense force. You can't, Zhyren agreed. But I can, and I'm not the only one anymore. The soul stone at Arya's throat suddenly flared with brilliant light, so intense that both Kaelthor and Molthar had to shield their eyes. Arya felt power surge through her, not just Serene's presence, but something vastly larger. Other consciousnesses, other ancient minds awakening across the void. My siblings heard your call, little guardian. They've been sleeping for 3,000 years, but your bond with me was a beacon they couldn't ignore. They're coming. Through the window, against the backdrop of the swirling nebula, shapes began to emerge. Massive, serpentine, composed of living starlight. Not one dragon, but dozens. Each one different. Some burned with the red fury of dying stars, others shimmered with the blue-white radiance of newborns. Still others pulsed with the deep purple of ancient nebulae. The stellar worms had returned. The entire palace fell silent as every being capable of seeing the phenomenon watched in awe and terror. These were creatures of legend, beings that had fought alongside the Guardians in the Age of Unity, predators and protectors in equal measure. Their very presence warped local space, caused instruments to malfunction, made hardened warriors fall to their knees in instinctive reverence. And they were all looking at Arya. We have no Guardian bonds yet. The largest of the dragons spoke, its voice resonating across multiple dimensions. But you called us, daughter of the ancient blood. We answer. Tell us, what would you have us do? Arya's mind reeled. She'd barely learned to work with Zhyren, barely understood her own abilities, and now she was expected to command an army of star dragons? It was absurd, impossible, and absolutely necessary. She looked at Kaelthor, saw the shock and calculation warring in his expression. This was a weapon beyond anything his empire possessed. With the stellar worms, he could crush the consortium, subjugate the rebellious Korthaxian houses, expand his domain across the entire galaxy. He could become the tyrant he'd always claimed to be. Or he could choose differently. Kaelthor, she said quietly, this is the moment. This is where you decide what kind of emperor you want to be. We can use the dragons to destroy your enemies, prove that resistance is futile. Rule through fear and overwhelming force. She stepped closer, placing her hand over his heart. Or we can use them to protect, to show that Guardian power isn't a weapon of conquest, but a shield for those who can't protect themselves. You're asking me to show mercy to those who would kill us both. I'm asking you to show them a better way. Kaelthor stared at her, and she felt the weight of his 300-year existence pressing down. All the choices made, all the blood spilled, all the reasons he'd learned to trust nothing but force. Asking him to change wasn't just asking him to alter his tactics. It was asking him to admit that everything he'd done might have been wrong. That was a death in itself. Choose quickly, Zhyren warned. The consortium ships are powering weapons. They're preparing to fire on the palace. Your Radiance, Commander Threx's voice crackled through the communication system. We need orders. Do we fight? Do we evacuate? Do we… Stand down, Kaelthor said. Silence. Your Radiance. Threx sounded genuinely confused. I said stand down. All Imperial forces are to cease fire and withdraw to defensive positions. No offensive action without my direct command. He looked at Arya. The Empress will handle this. Arya felt her heart skip. He was trusting her. Actually trusting her, despite every instinct he'd honed over centuries screaming that trust was weakness. She turned to face the window, to face the assembled stellar worms waiting in the void. The soul stone blazed at her throat, and she felt Serene's presence merge more deeply with her consciousness, not controlling, but supporting, guiding. Stellar worms, she spoke. And somehow her voice carried across the vacuum, amplified by guardian power and dragon bond. The ships approaching this station are filled with beings who seek to kill me, to kill the Emperor, to perpetuate a cycle of war and suffering that has plagued the galaxy for millennia. Then let us destroy them, one of the red-burning dragons suggested eagerly. Let us show them why the ancient guardians were feared. No, we show them why the guardians were respected. Arya took a deep breath, feeling the power coursing through her, terrifying and intoxicating in equal measure. Surround the consortium fleet. Don't attack. Don't threaten. Simply exist. Let them see you. Let them understand that guardian power has returned, and it chooses to protect rather than destroy. And if they fire anyway, then you shield this station. You save every life you can, but you do not retaliate unless I give the explicit command. We break the cycle here. Today, we show that power doesn't have to equal violence. The dragons were silent for a long moment, a debate happening across consciousness that Arya could only dimly perceive. Finally, the largest of them spoke again. You ask much, young guardian. You ask us to show restraint when we have hungered for 3,000 years. You ask us to trust that mercy will be answered with anything other than exploitation. I ask you to help me build something new. Then we will try. For you. For the memory of what the Guardians once represented. But know this. If your mercy fails, if your enemies interpret compassion as weakness, we will not hesitate to defend you. That is not negotiable. Understood. The stellar worms moved as one, a coordinated dance of living light that was the most beautiful thing Arya had ever seen. They flowed around the palace station, creating a barrier between it and the approaching consortium warships. Not an aggressive formation, but an undeniable statement. To reach the palace, you must go through us. On the command deck, which Arya and Kaelthor had rushed to moments earlier, dozens of screens showed the consortium fleet's reaction. Ships that had been confidently advancing suddenly halted. Weapons that had been charging down went to standby. Communications channels erupted with panicked chatter in a dozen languages. They had expected a weakened empire. They had expected civil war to provide cover for assassination. They had not expected the stellar worms. Open a channel, Kaelthor commanded. Let me speak to whoever's commanding that fleet. A figure appeared on the main screen, humanoid but clearly cybernetically enhanced, with more machine than biology remaining. Admiral Cronus of the Merchant Consortium, a being legendary for his ruthlessness and his ability to profit from any situation. Emperor Kaelthor, the Admiral said smoothly, as if his fleet wasn't frozen in space surrounded by dragons. This is an unfortunate misunderstanding. We were merely conducting routine exercises near your system. We had no intention of… Spare me the lies, Admiral. Kaelthor's voice could have cut diamond. You're here to kill my empress and fracture my empire. You've allied with rebel factions within my own court, and you've committed an act of war against the Zhyren Dynasty. Strong accusations, Your Radiance. I'm sure if we sit down and discuss this like civilized… Arya stepped forward, moving into the camera's view. The soul stone at her throat pulsed with steady light, and she felt Zhyren's amused presence supporting her. Admiral Cronus, you don't need to pretend. I can see the truth. I can see the coordination between your fleet and Lady Shara's faction. I can see the bribes paid, the promises made, the calculation that my death would be worth more than my life. She paused. You're absolutely right. For your business model, I'm an existential threat. Guardian abilities would expose the corruption that keeps wars profitable. Peace would be disastrous for your bottom line. Cronus's mechanical face showed something that might have been surprise. Then you understand why you cannot be allowed to. But here's what you didn't calculate, Arya continued. You didn't expect the stellar worms. You didn't expect that guardian power could return in a form that makes your fleet irrelevant. You thought you were playing a game where the rules were predictable? You were wrong. She felt power building in the Soulstone, felt the assembled dragons responding to her emotional state. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything that came after. She could order the destruction of the consortium fleet. 17 ships vaporized in seconds. A demonstration of power so overwhelming that no one would dare challenge the Empire again. Or she could do something no one expected. Admiral, I'm going to give you a choice. You can withdraw your fleet now, with the understanding that any future aggression against the Empire will be met with dragonfire. You'll return to your bases, you'll tell your masters that the age of profiting from war is ending, and you'll start considering what you'll do when the galaxy finally has peace. Or, Cronus asked, or the stellar worms will disable your ships, and you'll spend the rest of your artificially extended life in an imperial prison, while I personally investigate every transaction the consortium has made for the last century. I will expose every bribe, every illegal arms deal, every orchestrated conflict, and when I'm done, the merchant consortium will be synonymous with war crimes. Silence. Arya could feel Kaelthor's attention on her, could sense his disbelief at her strategy. She was offering their enemy a way out. She was showing mercy to those who'd tried to kill her. It went against everything Imperial doctrine taught, but it was the only way to prove that Guardian power was different. You have 1 minute to decide, Admiral. The seconds ticked by in agonizing slowness. On the tactical displays, Arya could see the consortium ship's weapons still charged, could see the calculations being run by their command AIs, could see the moment-by-moment assessment of whether they could punch through the dragon barrier. They couldn't. And everyone knew it. 50 seconds, 40, 30. All ships, Admiral Cronus finally said, defeat evident in his synthetic voice. Withdraw to jump coordinates. We're leaving. The consortium fleet began to turn, their massive warships executing precise maneuvers to break away from the palace station. The stellar worms parted to let them go, creating a corridor of living light that the human ships passed through like penitents, walking between gods. As the last ship cleared the system and jumped to hyperspace, the command deck erupted. Officers cheered. Warriors saluted. Even Commander Threx, who'd argued for immediate violence, looked grudgingly impressed. But Kaelthor was silent. He stood at the central command console, staring at the tactical display, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned to Arya. You let them go. Yes. They tried to kill you. To kill me. To destroy everything we're trying to build. Yes. And you showed them mercy. I showed them that there's a new way. Arya met his four-eyed gaze without flinching. I showed them that Guardian power isn't about domination. It's about transformation. Those ships that just left, they're going back to their masters with a story. A story about an empress who could have destroyed them but chose not to, who offered them a path forward instead of oblivion. And you think that story will change anything? I think stories are more powerful than weapons. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. You've ruled through fear for 300 years, Kaelthor. It's kept the Empire together, but it's also poisoned it. Every noble house plots against you. Every alliance is temporary. Every victory is hollow because you can never trust anyone. Trust gets you killed in this empire. Then maybe we need to build a different empire. Before he could respond, Molthar approached with news. Your Radiances, the Korthaxian houses have released their hostages and are requesting an audience. Lady Shara wishes to speak with the Empress directly. Arya glanced at Kaelthor, seeing the conflict still raging in his expression. Then she made a decision that would either save the Empire or doom them all. Bring her to the throne room. It's time we finished this. Lady Shara arrived in chains but walked with her head high, her gem-encrusted carapace still glittering despite her imprisonment. The throne room had been cleared of all but essential personnel, just Kaelthor and Arya on their thrones, with Commander Threx and Molthar as witnesses. The Korthaxian matriarch knelt, a gesture of required protocol, but her eyes burned with defiant pride when she looked up at Arya. So, Lady Shara said, her voice dripping with contempt, the human girl plays at Empress and expects me to bow to her mercy. How quaint. I don't expect anything from you, Lady Shara, Arya replied calmly. I simply want to understand why. Why ally with the consortium? Why risk everything, your family, your position, your life, to kill me? Because you're a threat to the natural order. The Korthaxian families have maintained power in this empire for 600 years. We survived regime changes, political upheavals, economic collapses, because we understand how the system works. Power flows to those who grasp it. Wealth accumulates to those who are ruthless enough to take it. That's the way of things. That's the way things have been, Arya corrected. But it doesn't have to be the way things remain. Lady Shara laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You really believe that, don't you? You actually think you can change millennia of galactic politics through idealism and dragon taming? You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Possibly both. Arya stood from her throne, descending the dais despite Commander Threx's warning gesture. She walked right up to Lady Shara, kneeling so they were at eye level. But I'm also right. The old system is dying, and everyone knows it. The question isn't whether change is coming. It's whether we guide that change or let it destroy us. She let the Soul Stone's light intensify, not as a threat, but as an invitation. I could have let the dragons kill you. Could have ordered your family's estate seized, your bloodline erased from imperial records. That's what you expected, isn't it? That's the game, you understand. Yes, Lady Shara admitted. So, let me surprise you. Arya stood, offering her hand to the kneeling noblewoman. I'm offering you a choice. Continue fighting against the inevitable, and you'll lose everything. Or work with us to build something new. Use your family's influence, wealth, and knowledge to help transition the empire into an age where power isn't just measured in weapons and fear. Lady Shara stared at the offered hand as if it were a poisonous snake. You're serious. Completely. You'd trust me? After I tried to have you killed? No, Arya said honestly. But I'd give you the chance to earn that trust. That's more than the old system would have offered. The silence stretched. Lady Shara looked from Arya to Kaelthor, who'd remained silent throughout the exchange. The Emperor's expression was still unreadable, but he made no move to countermand his Empress. Finally, slowly, Lady Shara reached up and took Arya's hand. I think you're insane, the Korthaxian matriarch said, as Arya helped her to her feet. I think this idealistic nonsense will get you killed within a year. But, she paused, something like respect creeping into her voice. I've lived 600 years, and I've never seen anyone stupid enough, or brave enough, to offer mercy to their attempted murderer. Perhaps there's something to this guardian wisdom after all. Does that mean you'll help? It means I won't actively work to destroy you, for now. We'll see if your new empire is more profitable than the old one. It wasn't enthusiastic support. It wasn't even friendship, but it was a beginning. As Commander Threx escorted Lady Shara away to arrange her conditional release and house arrest, Molthar approached Arya with wonder in his ancient eyes. You did it, Your Radiance. You broke the cycle. I've studied 3,000 years of galactic history, and I've never seen anyone accomplish what you just did. I haven't accomplished anything yet, Arya said tiredly. I've just delayed the inevitable backlash. Perhaps. Or perhaps you've started something that cannot be stopped. Molthar bowed deeply. The Guardians are truly returned. May the galaxy be ready for what that means. After he left, Arya finally allowed herself to sag against Kaelthor's throne, exhaustion hitting her like a physical blow. Using the Soul Stone's power so intensely, commanding the dragons, negotiating with Lady Shara, it had drained her more than any physical battle could have. Kaelthor's hand settled on her shoulder, steady and warm even through his armor. You're either the savior of the Empire, he said quietly, or its doom. I genuinely don't know which yet. Can I be both? Probably. His hand tightened slightly. You terrify me, Arya Vasquez. You walked into my empire 3 days ago, and you've already upended everything I thought I knew about power, about ruling, about what's possible. She looked up at him, seeing past the Emperor to the man beneath, lonely, exhausted, desperate for something he'd never allowed himself to hope for. Good, she said, because you terrify me too. But maybe that's how this works. Maybe we're supposed to scare each other into being better than we thought we could be. That's a terrible basis for an empire. Then it's a good thing we're building something new. Kaelthor pulled her up, his massive form enveloping her in an embrace that was surprisingly gentle given his size and strength. They stood there in the empty throne room, two beings from different worlds, bound by accident and choice in equal measure. Outside the windows, the stellar worms danced through the nebula, their living light painting patterns across the void that looked almost like words in an ancient language. A promise, a prophecy, a new beginning written in starfire. Epilogue, 6 months later. The Empire had changed, not overnight. Transformation never worked that way. But slowly, Deliberately, guided by an empress who could see truth and an emperor who was finally learning to trust it, the Zhyren Dynasty began to evolve. Arya stood in what had once been a prison cell and was now her personal study, reviewing reports from across imperial space. The consortium had honored their withdrawal, but not gracefully. They were currently funding 12 different separatist movements, trying to destabilize the empire through economic warfare rather than open violence. Lady Shara had proven surprisingly helpful in countering these efforts, using her family's trade connections to expose consortium shell companies and fraudulent operations. It turned out that former enemies could become useful allies when given the choice. The Korthaxian houses were still adjusting to the new order, still testing boundaries, still half-expecting everything to collapse back into familiar tyranny. But Arya had begun training other individuals with latent guardian abilities. Turned out the bloodline hadn't been as extinct as everyone believed, just dormant across thousands of worlds. The new guardians were young, frightened, powerful in ways they didn't understand. Exactly how Arya had felt 6 months ago. Now she was teaching them, guiding them, building an organization that could serve as a check on imperial power. Kaelthor had initially been wary of creating a force that could oppose him, but he'd slowly come to understand what Arya had known from the beginning. Power without accountability always corrupted. Even his power, especially his power. The stellar worms had dispersed across the empire, bonding with some of the new guardians, serving as both protectors and symbols of the coming age. Zhyren remained with Arya, a constant presence in the Soul Stone, and a source of amused commentary on human politics. "You've done well, little guardian," the dragon whispered in her mind. "The empire bleeds less than it did. That's something." "It's not enough," Arya murmured. "It never is. But you're learning the great secret. Transformation is work that never ends. You don't fix an empire. You tend it, like a garden, forever." The door opened, and Kaelthor entered without knocking, a privilege of being both emperor and husband. Their marriage had evolved from political necessity into something neither of them had quite expected: partnership. They argued constantly, challenged each other relentlessly, and somewhere in the friction had discovered a form of intimacy that was deeper than simple affection. They'd learned to see each other, truly see each other. "The Fourth Fleet reports another pirate incursion along the outer rim," Kaelthor said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Commander Threx wants to execute the captured raiders as an example. And what do you think?" "I think 6 months ago I would have agreed with him without hesitation. Now," he sighed, "now I wonder if there's a way to break the cycle that creates pirates instead of just killing them and waiting for more to emerge." Arya smiled. "You're learning." "I'm trying. Doesn't mean I'm succeeding." He looked at her with an expression that still took her breath away, vulnerability mixed with fierce determination. "Tell me the truth, Arya. Do you really think we can change the galaxy? Or are we just delaying the inevitable collapse?" She came around the desk, settling into his lap. Their size difference made it absurdly comfortable, and touched his face with gentle fingers. "I think," she said carefully, "that every empire eventually falls, including this one. But maybe, just maybe, we can build something that falls forward instead of backward. That leaves the galaxy better than we found it. That proves, even briefly, that power and compassion aren't mutually exclusive." "That's not very reassuring." "I know, but it's true." He kissed her then, deep and fierce and full of all the things they were both too stubborn to say aloud. When they pulled apart, his 4 eyes held a light she'd never seen in them before. Hope, fragile as starlight but undeniably present. "Then we'll try," he said. "We'll probably fail. We'll definitely make mistakes. But we'll try. Together? Together." Outside the window, a stellar worm streaked past, young, curious, drawn by the guardian presence within the palace. Arya felt Zhyren's attention shift toward the newcomer, felt the ancient dragon's pleasure at seeing her species flourishing again after millennia of sleep. The galaxy was waking up. The age of endless war wasn't over, might never be over. But for the first time in thousands of years, beings looked toward the future and saw possibilities other than conquest and survival. They saw choice. And that, Arya thought as she held her impossible emperor close, that was everything. In a distant corner of the galaxy, in a council chamber filled with beings who profited from chaos, a new plan was being formed. The Guardian Empress had proven more troublesome than anticipated. The stellar worms had complicated the traditional power dynamics. But empires always had weaknesses, Even especially empires trying to be better than they were. We'll study her, one shadowy figure said. Find her vulnerabilities. Everyone has them. And then? Then we'll show the galaxy what happens to those who disrupt the natural order of things. Laughter echoed through the chamber, cold, calculating, patient. The war for the galaxy's future had only just begun, but for the first time in 3,000 years, those fighting for something better than endless conflict had a champion. They had a guardian. They had an empress who looked at monsters and saw broken beings who might be saved. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that was enough. The end.